Well, good evening. We're back after our 3-day break, and you haven't missed a whole lot. We've got fair skies out there, and we're just stuck in the tropical weather pattern here in Texas. Let's take a look at the tropical weather. And that is quiet. No new tropical storms expected during the next 5 days. That's the forecast there from NHC. And out in the Pacific, our former Hurricane Lane is about out of the picture. Let me go out there. That's located just west-southwest of Honolulu there, and it's down to about 30 knots, 1006 millibars, so not much left at all. Let's look at the surface chart and look at the big picture here. Most of the moisture is concentrated in the western Midwest region right here in Illinois, Iowa, Missouri, Indiana, and they are getting some storms up in that area. We've also got this baroclinic system extending from Wisconsin to Minnesota and all the way down through the central Rockies. Got some pretty good cold air advection taking place in the Pacific Northwest around Idaho, the Oregon deserts, and up there in Washington. Some cold northwesterly winds flowing through that region there. Further south, we've got the monsoon pattern in effect in the Four Corners area, about the same as what we saw on Thursday there. In Texas, we've been seeing kind of a drying trend due to the presence of a large subtropical high aloft in that region right there. So that's keeping things kind of shut down in that area. But further north, where it's out of the influence of the subtropical high and more under the influence of the jet stream, they're getting some precip up in that area. Fairly seasonal weather for the southeast U.S. this evening. Sea breeze is active down there along the Gulf Coast, northern Florida into southeastern Georgia, and up in the New York City area, Philadelphia, Washington, D.C., just kind of a light westerly flow, typical for late summer. We can zoom in a little bit and maybe check out some of the surface plots. This is how things look this afternoon. We'll head up north a little bit, and yeah, there's a warm front up there from about southern Missouri out towards Lake Michigan. And then down to the south of that, you can see the strong, or the very rich moisture coming up from Illinois there. Evapotranspiration and evaporation helping a lot to bring those dew points up into the mid-70s there. So it's kind of amazing that the moisture is richer in that area than it is in Texas. And just to verify that, we can look at those dew points down there in Texas. Looks like about 67 around the DFW area. It is 75 in Houston, but around Austin, 64. So it's kind of ironic, you know, that you have to go up to the Chicago area to find some of the really rich moisture, but that's helping to support some of the thunderstorm activity in that area. We'll check that out on the satellite. And then up in the northwest, we can see the appearance of those northwesterly winds. Let me see if I can scroll over there. That's about as far as I can go, but you can see it up there in the Yellowstone area. Strong westerly winds up to 31 knots there at Jackson Hole. And up in the Sheridan, Gillette area, also out of the north at 32 miles an hour. So we're 32 knots. We are seeing a bit of a return to fall. Wouldn't quite expect that in August. All right. Now another way we can, oh yeah, I wanted to show you this. It does look like sea surface temperatures are coming up a little bit. This is sea surface temperature anomaly. And when we were starting out the summer, it was looking colder than usual out in the Bermuda Triangle area and adjacent waters of the Atlantic. But it looks like we're running about maybe half a degree up to maybe 1 to 1.5 degrees above normal. So we could start seeing maybe things picking up a little bit out in the Atlantic, and we're talking about this area right here. That's really the prime area for hurricanes in the Gulf and the southeastern U.S. there. Now, one way we can look that's closer to the surface, that's the 500-meter trajectory, so that's going to be about 1,500 feet above the ground. And we can see that it's got kind of this loop shape here, indicating a little bit of recirculated air. It looks like maybe some parcels from, this goes back about a week. Last weekend into early last week, it looks like the parcels kind of moved offshore, and then they got blown inland back to DFW. So the origin is not really from the deep Caribbean into the DFW area. It's more just along the Texas coastal waters there. In the very upper levels, up at about 3 kilometers, the mid-levels, you can see there's been an origin from Canada. So no wonder we've seen some of that smoke making it into the area aloft. We also did a trajectory for Chicago, and again the red one is the lowest one, and we can see that the trajectory on that air mass kind of pushed offshore a little bit and then surged northward about Thursday or Friday, and just ending up there in Illinois today. So that's been kind of carried by those southerly winds coming up across the Great Plains. Here's Atlanta. Looks a little bit different there. Again, the red is the low-level trajectory. So we can see that we've had an origin from Ontario. So maybe a polar air mass origin. It looks like that got carried off the Atlantic coast. See if I can get my cursor back. Yeah, there it goes. So for maybe about 3 days, we saw this parcel moving offshore. And then eventually it got carried by east-northeasterly winds into the southeast U.S. So no wonder the moisture is a little bit on the weak side there in Georgia. However, up in the mid-levels, yeah, there have been origins from Texas and Canada there. Now, let's check out New York. This is JFK Airport, and this is showing that, again, there's been a trajectory coming out of Canada, so it looks like a polar air mass pushing cold air offshore, and then it's been sitting out here under high pressure, maybe around Thursday or Friday, and then it just kind of moved inland like that. So kind of a similar life cycle to what we saw there in Atlanta. All right, let's check out the thickness. Warm front extending into the Minneapolis area. And looks like a series of fronts coming all the way through the Great Basin area and then maybe into northern California like that. So there's a quick look at where the fronts are. You can see cold air advection moving through Oregon and Idaho and Montana. This, in fact, let me just shade it. Yeah, all this is cold air advection. So cold northwesterly winds sweeping into that area, bringing the temperatures down. And of course, Washington, a couple weeks ago, they were up to 106, 107 degrees. On the Great Plains, typically when we see these systems coming in from the northwest, that usually means a pretty significant change out here, and often the appearance of a dry line. We would often find it in this area right here. Now, I haven't looked at the data to know if there is a dry line out in that area, but that's kind of the area I would look. And then the low-level jet would be positioned in that band of strong pressure gradient kind of in this area here. And what I'm referring to is these black lines where they're packed very tightly together. That's indicating a strong pressure gradient and probably a strong southerly wind component right in that area. So on the 850 millibar chart, I might be looking for a low-level jet in that area right there. Okay, and then out to the east we can see the Bermuda High. That's this entire system right there. And this is a very classic look for August. You can see the stronger part of it is out over the central Atlantic, right in this area here. And then we see the easterly flow coming into the Carolinas and Florida and into the Gulf. And This is probably, now that we're kind of building in this pressure gradient out there in the Gulf, that you might have to start looking for easterly waves coming into Texas, the Gulf Coast area of Florida, and possibly tropical storms at some point. We don't have a good idea where the next one is. You know, there's certainly no strong easterly wave. I don't know. We can take a quick look and see, but this is kind of like the very early stages before we get those systems coming in from the Cape Verde area. So let me bring up the polar orbiter and see if we can see any strong weather systems coming out of that area. Yep, looks pretty quiet out there in the Atlantic. Yeah, look at that. It's just completely fair weather. And we pick up a couple systems out here as we pick up the intertropical convergence zone in that area, and maybe one good system right there. But we're not going to really be able to make any forecasts based on that. That's at least a week and a half off. Oh yeah, look at that. Looks like Europe getting a pretty good system there. Very deep occlusion there south of Iceland, and we see this large baroclinic shield right here. So that's indicating probably a cold front, looking something like that right there. Warm front cutting right through England like that, and then an occluded fronts extending northwest, kind of like that. Okay, so let's go back to our main chart sequence here and see what we're looking at as far as storms. There's our SPC mesoanalysis showing a pretty good MCS moving through Wisconsin. Let me see if I can pull up some of that on the mesoanalysis plot. Let's see here. Now there's that one system right there in the Milwaukee area, but I've got some other charts we can look at to go over that. In fact, let me just go ahead and bring that up. Now here's an interesting one. This is South Dakota showing a pretty good storm going up. If we go back earlier in the day, it looked pretty clear in that area, but if you go out to the west, out there in the Black Hills area, you can see this one cloud coming through. This is tied to an upper level system moving quickly west to east, and there it is right there. You see it coming in there from the west, and it comes into contact with a low-level moisture field out in this area. And right here about 5:15 p.m., you can see this one cell coming together west of Pierre. Looks pretty spectacular there. Nice isolated storm, good anvil, and a bit of a flanking line right there. It looks a little bit mushy there, but towards the very end, looks like one good overshoot there. So a little bit of action right there in South Dakota, and then in here's the Midwest sector. Got numerous storms in that area. Earlier this evening, or this afternoon, it looked like this. Looks like a upper level system coming in there from the west, a lot of cirrus and mid-level cloud. But down beneath it, looks like a few updrafts starting to go up there in western Wisconsin. And then during the afternoon, we see that kind of build and start extending southward into the Madison area right there. And then just in the last hour or two, it just heads eastward into the Milwaukee and Green Bay area right there. Not quite all the way down to Chicago, but it is kind of close there, and there's a few cells out there to the east around Quincy and Rockford, just west of Rockford there. Okay, elsewhere around the country, let's pull up the national picture. All right, there's our animation there. And it's quite a change there in the Pacific Northwest out in this area here. You can see a lot of, it's actually one good wave coming through that area right there, but this is a very strong cold air advection pattern. And we can zoom in on that and see what that looked like. All right, there it is right there. A lot of overcast, but looks like our front is kind of hanging out through that area there. And we'll go ahead and animate that. And you can see all this altocumulus and stratocumulus covering the Pacific Northwest there with that northwesterly flow coming in through that region. All right, let's take a look at what the station plots look like, see what the temperatures are running out in that area. Looks like lots of 60s, a few 50s, and some low 70s through that area. And you can see Boise there with north winds and 71 degrees. Okay, quick look at soundings. Yeah, the Fort Worth sounding looking like this. Moisture is not too impressive. You can see it drops off just above the surface, up at about 3,000 to 4,000 feet. Dew points are running about 55 to 56, and pretty much 50s all the way up to about 8,000 or 9,000 feet. So that's one reason we're not seeing a whole lot of thunderstorm activity in this part of the country. Also, very warm column. You can see how this column kind of bulges right there around 24, 23, 22,000 feet. And that's due to subsidence underneath that subtropical high aloft. Take a look at a couple of other areas. Let me see if Atlanta's up. Yep, there's the Atlanta sounding. And again, looks like a lot of warm air aloft. Kind of a similar picture there. And very shallow moisture. Looks like mid-60s dew points from the surface up to about 2,000. And then it rapidly drops off. By the time you get up to about 5,000 feet, you're only looking at 50-degree dew points, and then it gets even drier above that. And you can see the northeasterly flow in that area. That kind of explains why there's dry air in those layers there. Okay, Lincoln, Illinois. This is northern Illinois. Looks like this would be about southwest of Chicago. And moisture is actually pretty impressive in that area right there. So we go from about 72 to 73 Fahrenheit at the surface, and up at about 5,000 feet, we're looking at about 64 to 65 degree dew points. So mid-upper 60s dew points, some low 70s through that column, and that's going to support some parcels that are way over to the right. So if we lift 86 degree temperatures with that, that gives us quite a substantial amount of CAPE. That's probably about 2,500 to 3,000 CAPE there. And some dry air just above the surface in the mid-levels. That's going to support downdraft generation there. About the only problem I really see is just kind of a weak shear profile there. Winds are pretty much unidirectional, westerly to northwesterly throughout the entire column, and only just a modest 40 to 50 knots up there at about 39,000 feet. So the thermodynamics look good, but the shear could certainly be better. Okay, go ahead and head into the forecast. And obviously we're not expecting much for Texas. We're just going to have that southerly flow in place, bringing up just more moisture, maybe a return of the sea breeze tomorrow. Looks like that gets started up, but the upper level high should keep us kind of shut down. And we'll take a look at the upper level patterns in a second. Let me just check in on chat here real quick. Pretty good turnout tonight. Hello to Carl Burkhoff, Brian Lowe, Shirley Keast, brief thunderstorm in that area. JT, reporting Crystal Lake, Illinois, 89 degrees. Erica Baker, Coffeyville, Kansas, 87 over 70. And getting some wind there also. Got Fun with Tech here and Burl H. Brett Dean reporting 78 there in southern Jersey. JT reporting a pressure, I think, of 1013.55. Carl Berghoff watching for convective initiation in Wisconsin. And Brian Lowe mentioning the class there at Salisbury University. So, yeah, some good reading for that right there. Mr. Manlet, 86 at Rockford, Illinois. And Ryan Toomey is out there in Florida joining us. Mr. Manlet saying Milwaukee getting hit hard by an MCS. Tornado warning earlier there from Carl Berghoff. Got Adam Davis here and Mr. Manlet asking about initiation. Well, the storms are already initiated. They're moving out to the eastern Wisconsin area right now. Carl Berghoff discussing some of the activity there, Minnesota. And Carl Berghoff waiting for the SPC 00 outlook to add some credence to his forecast. Rad is joining us from Tucson. Electric Dog says hello, liked. Appreciate that. Moe Greenway joining us from Georgia. So let's look at that upper level pattern there. If this was winter, we would probably be looking at some cold weather coming up here for this week with this strong trough up there in the Pacific Northwest. But due to the fact it's August, we're probably not going to see that except up in the northern U.S. So running that forward, yeah, that trough digs on into the Wyoming and Montana area, and then it just kind of shears out and then lifts out into the Great Lakes area, and you can see the subtropical high just kind of anchored over the southeast, right there over the Carolinas. And then as we get into Thursday and Friday this week, subtropical high is pretty much covering most of the southern U.S. By Thursday, the strongest part of it is over New Mexico. And then when we get into the weekend, it's pretty much just sitting there over western Texas. One strong bit of a trough coming into Nevada, but I'm not sure if that's going to be strong enough to break that down. Yeah, almost. This one trough, pretty strong there. About a week from now, looks like it gets into Colorado, Kansas, and Nebraska, so maybe a bit of severe for that area. That's going to be September 3rd. Man, September's already here. And then a very strong trough coming into California there. And yep, that one lifts northeast into the northern plains there. So we're not going to really see much change over the next week and a half or so. But towards the very end, this pattern looks pretty interesting. A very large northwesterly flow pattern. So that could definitely kick some cold air into the central and eastern U.S. towards the very end. So we're talking about maybe the second week of September. So for a closer look at that, we'll just run very quickly through the surface charts. And you can see that subtropical high, the Bermuda high anchored over the southeastern U.S. right there. And so as we go forward, not much change, just southerly flow through the Great Plains, some northwesterly flow on the West Coast region. And it looks like towards the very end, yeah, that's the next change that I see. This is way out there at the end, 372 hours, September 11th, but it's bringing this very strong polar system southeastward, so we'll have to monitor this. If that happens, that could bring temperatures down maybe about 15 to 25 degrees below normal across the Midwest, North U.S., and maybe parts of the South Plains. So we'll see about that. If that was winter, Yeah, we definitely have a cool down, but we'll just have to see because this is still the tail end of summer. Okay, so yeah, it will be kind of a quiet week. Let me see if I can bring up the radar very quickly. We'll see what's going on there in Wisconsin. So we got GR level 2 coming up here. Yeah, and it should be coming up here shortly. Okay, go ahead and bring this up north. And we'll go to the Milwaukee radar site and bring that up. And while we're waiting on that, let me just check the satellite one more time. Let me zoom in on that just a little bit. Okay, so yeah, this is showing our storms there coming into the Milwaukee area. And you can see the overshoots on that last few frames right there. And let's see if the radar's up. Yeah, it is. Yeah, these storms are already on their way out already. And some other cells further out to the west. They look kind of disorganized. And let me see if I can get a quick animation. Yep, there we go. Okay, well, that's about all I got for tonight. I will go ahead and leave you with that, and we'll be back on Tuesday. I appreciate you watching. Take care, and we will see you then. Bye-bye.